Hey folks, I'm getting ready to get started. We're going to give folks just a little bit longer to get in before we start talking about our personal statements and experiences and what to do, and more importantly, what not to do. But I'm having a little trouble making sure that our presentation is up. And so so two things to let you guys know. Number one, if you have questions during the presentation, you can post them in the chat and I will go, or in your questions, and I will go back after we're done and try to answer all of those for you guys. My plan is to leave about 15 minutes, so about 1:45 to just cut off the presentation and start answering questions. The thing more importantly is, can you guys see and it is not wanting to open these. Can you see my webinar? Can you see the PowerPoint? Can everybody hear me? Can you see me? Can you hear the PowerPoint? Can you see the PowerPoint? It looks like it's up for you guys. I just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Because that's what I see. I just want to make sure you can all see it. This thing is not speedy in opening. Can you guys hear me? Can you see me? I'm looking in the chat button. I don't see anybody responding but me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just in case, if anybody can't see or whatever, just let me know. Like I said, post your questions in the chat area. Let's get rolling so I don't waste your time, because it's that time of year. Applications open in May for keying information for submission anytime between the beginning of May and the end of May. People are panicking and freaking out about their personal statement and experiences. So I want to give you a little bit of background about me. I'll do a poll to sort of figure out where everybody is, and then we will start from there to kind of give you my insight into all of this. So first of all, my name is Dr. Anita Paschall, and I have been doing this forever and a day. I am a freaking dinosaur. I turned 60 next year. I've been doing medical admissions for over 25 years now. I sit on 5 medical admissions committees. I have reviewed thousands and thousands of applicants. I've advised students from the beginning of when they were in college and high school and beyond. But more importantly, I'm an MD, PhD, and that means at some point I was you guys, okay? And oftentimes when I'm giving advice, I feel like people are thinking I'm going, you've got to do this, don't do this. And I'm telling you, because when I was a wet behind the ears, novel, somewhat ignorant pre-med student, I made all of these same mistakes. So I'm trying to keep the students that I work with from making the same mistakes that I did. I'm very well connected in the medical community, but more importantly, year after year, I sit on these committees and I watch how students come through and how committees look at them, how students evolve over time. And I really want to give you guys some insight into that. So what I'm going to do is talk about your personal statement, and then I'm going to talk about your experiences and sort of the role that the Princeton Review can or will play in that. But before I do, like I said, I really would like to do a poll to sort of figure out who all I'm working with. So let me do this poll and let me launch this poll for you guys. Can you tell me when you guys are looking to apply? So do I have people who have already applied? Do I have people who are looking to apply this upcoming cycle, meaning starting in May? And some of you guys who are in future application cycles, like the next year, 2024, 2025, or beyond. Because I'm going to tell you, this information is going to be very advantageous for anybody on any of those spectrums. Like if you applied this year and you haven't gotten in and you're like, frick, why haven't I gotten in? Maybe this will let you know. I can tell you I do rejection reviews on a regular basis. Last year, I did not do a rejection review with a student who had below a 3.8 and below a 5.18 MCAT. And you're like, well, why didn't they get in? Oftentimes, it's a quick look at their application and we can pinpoint it immediately. So I want to help you with what those mistakes are. For those of you guys for this upcoming cycle, if you have not already started your personal statement and started drafting your experiences, you need to get on that now. Year after year, I talk to students anytime from like May the year before all the way up to now, and it's like, I got to focus on my MCAT. I got to focus on this. And please don't get me wrong. You should spend 6 months preparing for your MCAT. Okay, but you should spend a minimum of 6 months preparing your application materials. And that's not just getting your letters of recommendation, but putting into the thought process of what your personal statement is going to articulate, and more importantly, where your experiences are. And I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. So if you're looking to apply in the future cycles, really pay attention to this. If you're getting ready to apply in May, get hopping on your personal statement. Right now with the students that I work with, we are currently this week and next week finishing up all our first reviews of personal statements. The whole month of February is dedicated to nothing but first reviews of experiences. That allows me in May, in March, and April to be working on second and third reviews, which is honestly, I take their submissions, completely retweak them and hand them back in a form that is, from my experience, what is committee ready, which really empowers you in that time to go, what am I missing? What do I need to do? So thank you so much for your feedback. I'm going to close this poll because let's get on to what we really need to talk about. What do you need to know? All right, so what's the field like? Last year, I think was what we would call probably a different sort of year, because in an average year, we get about 54 to 58,000 applications. Last year, kind of coming out of COVID and everything, we saw an astronomical increase. We had almost 63,000 applicants, and on a given year, acceptance rates are generally between 40 and 42% of people who apply are accepted, which to a lot of you guys may be like, holy crap, I didn't realize it was that little. Yeah, you got a greater chance flipping a coin than you do getting into med school. And that's just because of the number of applicants and the sheer number of spots. So you want to maximize that application. The average number of applications is between 7 and 15 schools that students apply to. Last year, we saw that go up a little bit. And the average school is going to get between 10,000 and up to 18,000 applications or more. All right, so let's do the math. Let's just think 10,000 applications at an average school, and we're going to interview 300 to 500 students for 100 slots. That means the average applicant at a school they apply to has about a 1 in 100 chance of getting that slot. And people get very caught up and focused on, have I done the whole checklist? And honestly, you've got to make sure your experiences and the things you've done are in order. But then they miss the step that goes from what you've done to how you articulate it, what's going to catch a committee's eye. And I need you guys to think about this like the, oh, crap, I can't even think of Limu, Emu, and Doug, Liberty Mutual. See, I can't even remember what they sell because we see this commercial over and over and over and over again. And hearing students say to us, because typically if you ask any pre-med, why do you want to go to med school? Why do you want to go to dental school? Why do you want to go to any type of healthcare field? I hear the same answers. I want to help. I want to serve. I want to make a difference. My Nana died. I love science. You know, I want to make the world a better place because every person deserves access to healthcare and blah, 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 blah. And honestly, don't get me wrong, I'm not being cynical because those really are all the reasons you should want to go to med school. But you've got to step back and be realistic about it. First of all, by this time in the cycle where I've been interviewing since July, I am so tired of hearing how much you guys want to help and serve and not really putting the teeth behind it, that it becomes like that emu just walking across the screen and you're going, oh, look, it's an emu again. Who are they again? You don't want to be that person. Now, the idea behind having that stupid bird is so that you've got something that's catchy that you remember. And so it's blending the aspects of what have I done to tell a med school. We're looking at two key things. Number one, what kind of physician in our gut do we feel like this person's going to be based on what they've done and how they say it? And secondly, how are they going to fit into our class? Because those are two big things we're looking at that people often miss. And your personal statement and your experiences are your first chance to articulate that. Now, again, we said that of all of the applicants, only about 40% are going to get accepted. About 60% are going to get denied, okay? And of this 60%, I say this over and over and over again, of that 60%, 50% of those kids have great grades and great MCAT scores, which is often what my folks get so focused on, because the truth is that's what's going to come through your screen. I want you, and I'm not trying to belittle this process, but I want you to think about going into a club or a bar or an event. If you're single and you're looking to meet someone, okay, at first blush, you know nothing about them. What's going to catch your attention? It's going to be physical aspects about them, what you see on the surface. And with 10,000 applications, med school's first line screen is going to be on that GPA and that MCAT score. So when you're looking or aspiring to schools, and I get this all the time, because of the schools I interview for, 3 of them are in the top 20. And I get students all the time who go, I have to go to a top 20 school. And I will tell you, 2 of my deans will go, do you want to go to med school or do you want to go to our school? Because really your focus should be getting into med school. I can tell you that I went to Chapel Hill for med school. I went to Wake Forest for my PhDs. In my entire career, I think maybe 5 people have asked me where I went to med school. They often ask me where I did my residencies, but nobody cares. They care I got a shingle on my wall that says I'm an MD and I can take care of them and I've got a good reputation. And that's really understanding what you bring to the table. So the first thing is, as you're looking at where you want to apply, look at what your base credentials are. What's my median MCAT and my GPA, and what's the school's median MCAT and the median GPA? And really reasonable is within your target schools are going to be 1 to 2 points where your scores are and their median for the MCAT, and 0.1 for your GPA. So like if you're a 3.6 and you're looking at schools in the 3.7 to 3.8 median GPA range, you're probably going to be pretty solid for target schools. Reach schools are going to be 3 to 4 points above that. When you set your school list, you should really only have what I say 4 to 5 reach schools and keep the bulk of your stuff in target programs. Now, if you've got an unlimited supply and you don't mind writing secondaries till the cows come home, apply to as many schools as you want to, but be realistic in what you're doing. Now, we talk about the average timeline, and typically it's what I see is folks are like, it's April, spring break's over, I'm gonna start drafting my personal statement and looking at their experiences, and they're laying out their experiences and they're like, I got 9, and AMCAS allows 15. If you're only sitting with 9, you done missed the boat. And this is actually why when I'm working with students, I love to get students now anywhere up till like September, October, before they're going to apply in May. Because if you're missing stuff, we can fix it. March or April is not the time to be going, oh crap, I ain't got no service, I don't have any clinical, because that is not the time. Because if I look at your application and all that stuff started the month before you applied, that probably means you're not ready. So with my students, they get their timelines in November. They know when their personal statements are due to me, their experiences are due to me, and we can get that knocked out. And then February, March, and April, you're revising those. Also, by January, you should be requesting your letters of recommendation. And you should give those folks a timeline of around April 30th, because people are slackers. They'll always be late. You've got May to circle back with those folks, but you don't want to start requesting letters of recommendation in April. Put them on alert, because by the end of the semester, especially professors, they're getting ready to peace out. And come fall, half those people take the summer off. You're not going to be able to get them. Ideally, in terms of letters of recommendation, you want to focus on 2 science, 1 non-science letter. The reason on that non-science academic letter is there are a few schools that want a non-science. If you've gone on to pursue graduate work or post-bac work, get a letter from one of those folks who can speak to you. If you've done a lot of research, get a research letter. If the majority of MD programs don't require a clinical letter, but you'd be amazed at how many people I know that have gone for exit interviews when they didn't get accepted, and they're like, well, you didn't have a clinical letter. Oh, well, your school doesn't require one. Yes, but we like one. So cover your bases. If possible, get a clinical letter. And if you're applying to osteopathic programs, make sure you've got a DO letter in that area. I've talked to countless people who are like, I'm going to apply MD and DO. That's good. Will increase your chances. What do you know about osteopathic medicine? Not much. Well, I'm going to tell you, every DO application goes, why are you inclined to study osteopathic medicine? And if I read one more time, because osteopathic medicine embraces a preaching principle holistically, the whole person, like we as MDs only like look at a toe or it is so much more than that. And you need to have gained some exposure to be able to articulate that. And I'm going to tell you, the biggest part of this journey is understanding who you are, what your brand is, and the unique things you bring to the table. Yes, I've done clinical, I've done research, I've engaged in service, but what's unique about each one of those that you will write in a personal statement and or an experience and secondaries, that when I look at your application, I go, meet all the criteria, and here are the unique things you've done. And that's the additional step that so many people miss. You want to have everything ready for your primary application come May. Okay, in July, by the way, I'm going to do a webinar on secondary essays and interview prep, so make sure you sign up for that. But in April, I've got a webinar about the most common mistakes, and I'm going to tell you one of the most common mistakes. People get so flipped out about their personal statement, which I will talk about first, okay? And I'm going to tell you something, it's probably the least important part of your application. Okay, we're going to screen on your GPA and your MCAT. Do you make the criteria? And if I get one more person who says, but the med schools say they do a holistic review. Yeah, they do a holistic review. You're correct, because we can't say we screen out on GPA and MCAT. Okay, but if there are 10,000 people applying and 10,000 people with good experiences, or let's just say 5,000 with good experiences. And of those 5,000 people with good experiences, 2,000 have strong GPAs and good experiences. Who do you think is going to get the nod? Because if you're trying to, I mean, think about going to the grocery store and something as simple as you're trying to buy fruit, okay? And you got fruit over here that's extra ripe, and you got fruit over here that's kind of dinged up, but still edible. Both these are edible, but you got the perfect piece of fruit that's just right, just the right size. That's the one you want to pick. Make yourself the one that stands out in all of those. And it's the funny thing, because every year when we get to interviews, we will pull people who look so good on paper, and then they lay an egg in their interview. So it's about combining all parts of your application, being prepared, making sure you've got your MCAT in, making sure you submit in the correct time in May, make sure your secondaries go in July as soon as you get them, and that you know how to interview. Be the complete package, and that starts with the most complete application. So I know Everybody's all wigged out about their personal statement. So I'm going to start first with the personal statement. But I'm going to tell you, we screen on your GPA and MCAT. The second screen is your experiences, hands down. So before you even jump into that freaking personal statement, and I've read some great ones this month, don't get me wrong, but there has not been 1 year that I've had a personal statement come across my desk that I've looked at that personal statement and everything else and said, by God, we got to have this kid. Now I'm going to tell you, we've had a lot of them come through that go, oh my. Okay, so you don't want to be that. So you do want a good personal statement, but it's not the most important part. You're going to get an electronic screen of your application that's going to split out all your experiences. Now, AMCAS has 15 options for those experiences. When you go through and you make a list of your experiences, the first thing you need to do is take all your shadowing and combine it into one category, because experiences are rated on length of time, numbers of hours, and what they are. So if you put all your shadowing into one category, you can do the full span of when you shadowed, which is great because you can't put things from high school in your application. But let's say I shadowed Susie Q in high school, and then I went back to shadow her in college. I can start my shadowing in high school, make that date extend all the way to college and beyond. So maybe I've got 2016 up till 2023 and actually through 2024, because your experiences can extend up to August 1st of the application cycle. I can put 10 different specialties in. I've got all the hours and I can focus on what I learned through that experience. That will give you much more weight than a bunch of one-off shadowings taking up 15 experiences for 4 hours, 8 hours, 2 hours. And that looks like I didn't bring anything to the table. Now, if you lay out your experiences and you're having to have honors and awards, which by the way should be one category and everything in one, all listed separately. If you're having to list Dean's List, because you dang well better be on the Dean's List if you're applying, as a separate category, you may not have enough. So right now, if you're applying this cycle or even thinking about next cycle, sit down and make a list of everything you've done. I always talk about, we use what we call the class system. Class, you're going to take a class and you want to get an A, and that A stands for acceptance. What does class stand for? It stands for clinical. That is shadowing and unpaid and paid hands-on clinical experience. It's leadership. I expect to see at least 2 leadership things from each one of you guys. And that can be a title, like I was president of the Mickey Mouse Club, or it can be I led my independent research project in my lab. But you should have at least 2 things where you can demonstrate how you learn to lead other people, okay? Academic, pass that GPA and MCAT. Have you done research? Have you done things to expose yourself to people of different cultures, backgrounds, religions, races, studied abroad, international heritage, family travel, work with the underserved? Teaching and tutoring. Have you worked as a TA? Have you tutored other people? Have you led instruction? Have you trained people in your lab? Have you trained people in your job? Can you communicate complicated information to people who don't understand it? That's why teaching and tutoring is one of the categories in the experiences. How about languages? Do you speak a different language? Very appealing to a med school. All of that plays into the A in class. Next is service. Time and time and time again, I see people, the 2 big reasons that those people with good GPAs and good MCATs don't get accepted, they don't have enough clinical and they don't have enough service, okay? And I get that you're planning to do that during your application year, but if I'm not interviewing you until August or October or September, December, somewhere in there, I need to see that on your application. I'm not going to take your word on anticipated. And yes, AMCAS now allows you to put completed and anticipated, but if you're heavily weighted in anticipated, you should only have 1 to 2 experience that are anticipated with no completed. And you want a minimum of about half of your completed to half your anticipated if it's newly started. So those are kind of words of advice. Now, in terms of service, we're looking at, yes, it's great you donated to the blood drive or this or that, but what I'm looking for is, have you put yourself outside your comfort zone and engaged with people who are different than you, who you have learned from the service that you're doing. And again, we'll talk much more about this coming up, but that is why service is so important. I'm looking for a minimum of 3 service things you've done for at least 6 months for 50 hours total on a regular basis. Last year, the average number of service hours was over 400 hours of combined service. You need, and then the last is social, other things you've done, hobbies, interest, engagement. So right now, you should look at the 15 categories, all the categories that AMCAS provides. You need to make a list of all your experiences. If you're having to group things together, maybe I'm going to do campus organization service, and I'm going to put all my campus service in one category because I've got so many things, then you're probably ready. But if you're having to stretch, or you've got less than 12 experiences, you need to do a serious self-reflection on, am I ready to apply? Now, as you look at all of the categories, the next step is to look at the AMCAS core competencies. And yes, I know we were going to talk about personal statement, but you've got to understand why experiences are so important, because AMCAS has 15 core competencies, and no, it's not a one-to-one with your 15 experiences. It is, they expect you to connect the dots between what I did and what I learned, and articulate that in your personal statement and articulate that in your experiences. Okay, and I'll give you an example when we talk about experiences, but let's go to your personal statement because I know y'all chomping at the bit. So I already said I'd start working with my folks in November. First drafts of personal statements were due this month. Now, I'm going to continue to obviously enroll people up till May because people come late to the party. But as an overall goal, we want to get that first draft of that personal statement in January or as close to it. So my folks have been writing, rewriting again. And my daddy always taught me when he was alive, write it, set it down, walk away for 24 hours, come back, reread it. Have somebody who knows nothing about you read it and see if they can connect the dots. See, a strong personal statement is going to be like 5 to 6 paragraphs. You got 5,300 characters, including spaces, which flips people out because they're like, how am I supposed to tell everything in 5,300 characters? You're not. Okay. That's why you have experiences to write in. That's why you have secondary essays. That's why you have interviews. Your personal statement should reflect your journey. And I'll talk to you about the common mistakes, but there should be a catch, something to get my attention, an experience, a background, a story. Think about it like when you're at the movies and you're sitting there watching the trailers for the upcoming movies and you go, I want to watch that. That's what you want me to go, ooh, I want to read more. And then there should be 3 to 4 paragraphs that tell your journey, be that your exposure to research, a clinical experience you had, and you need to demonstrate that commitment. And then your last paragraph should be a summary, a reflection back to the beginning, and a challenge for your future. All right, that does not happen in 24 hours. I know many of us, me included, had term paper due. We pulled an all-nighter. We turned that sucker in 24 hours. Do not do that with your personal statement. And do not leave things to question. Oftentimes I will get, I moved to the US as a child. Were you 2? Were you 10? Were you 15? Give me details, all right? Now, back off the cliches. And we've already talked about this, okay? Limu, emu, I can't remember who you are. Don't tell me you want to help, serve, like science, all those other things. Demonstrate it in the things that you do. If you say inspired by my early research in high school, motivated me to study neuroscience in college, connect it, and then what you learned from it or whatever. I get so many personal statements about Aunt Nana died and my whole life was turned upside down, and I'm going to make sure that nobody else dies like that. Okay, be realistic. Okay, when you're writing about things, step back and go, okay, Nana died of a stroke, and I want to make a difference in other people's lives. I'm not going to cure strokes. Okay, I read all the time in my future practice, Everyone will be served. No one will be turned away due to, inability to pay or whatever. Really? Okay. I'm going to send every uninsured homeless person to your office. Now, again, it is great to want to reach the underserved, but it's also not realistic. So understand what you're doing and speak about it intelligently through the actions that you've done, and understand the connection of why we need to increase access. But we're never going to cure all those issues, but we can make it better. And that's the difference. Okay. You want to help the underserved, yes, but how are you going to be a part of that? Be interesting. And this is the thing I've talked about, okay? Do not become the blend master. Create unique stories, images that will touch my heart and that I will feel it in my gut and that I will know you get it by what you've done, be that your own journey and your own struggles or people you've interacted with and that impact on your life. And understand, think about, reflect in your life. We have good friends of ours that on a Saturday night, we were having dinner with them. And it's a coworker of my husband's. On Tuesday morning, 4 days later, my husband sends me a text and says, such and such had to run out today. She said her husband was having a stroke. And we were all like, oh my goodness. And then we get a message back and it's like, oh, he was just numb in his leg. They think he's okay. And then they go to the hospital and the doctors go, actually, you did have a stroke. You have a brain bleed. And in a matter of 4 days, in just a couple of hours, everything changed. But I'm going to take it one step further. They discharge him from the hospital 2 days later. He comes back the following week for his follow-up, and they say, it actually wasn't a stroke, and I see you're doing better, but unfortunately, it was a brain tumor. And 24 hours later, he finds out that not only is it a brain tumor, but it's a tumor the size of a golf ball, and it's a grade 4 glioblastoma with a life expectancy of 11 months. Here's a young couple with small children. Yeah, and yes, they're younger than me, with small children who the week before were planning their futures with their children, who now were preparing for the fact that in 11 months, he may not be with them. They've now entered chemo and radiation and all the other aspects of it. So now enter the third part. How much is not covered by insurance? So they went from planning retirement to wondering how they're going to pay for their next meal. So many things in life can impact us that we don't realize. Think about reflections with COVID. Think about people that you knew. Think about people that you encounter, and intertwine that in your personal statement. Show, don't tell. I am so tired of hearing, I'm empathetic, I'm compassionate. Great. Show me through what you've done that you're compassionate or you're empathetic or that you understand the journey, that you understand we're not teaching patients, we're not taking care of patients, we're taking care of people. And what's happened in your life to understand that your role as a physician is not, oh, I'm a physician, but rather you're taking care of people just like our friends who outside that hospital, outside that office, have a family, a life, things that are going on outside your office, and how you demonstrate you understand that. Don't ramble, although I tend to ramble at times, but you've got 5,300 characters. You need to quickly articulate your journey. Now, I'm going to tell you some things. Okay, first of all, I don't know what is up with today's writer, but y'all never met a period, evidently, that you liked, because there are times where I will read an entire paragraph, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines. There ain't a period to be found. If you can read a sentence and you got to take a breath, it's probably too long. Good rule of thumb, if you've typed it out in 11 or 12 point font and you've now trailed past the third line, your sentence probably too long. And I can't keep somebody's attention, okay? You've got 5,300 characters to make your statement, make them count. Now, a lot of folks will go, Should I address my GPA issues? Should I address not getting in? Should I address hiccups in my application? And the answer to that is actually yes and no. Almost every secondary you will have, and I will tell you 90% of schools automatically generate secondaries, so you go and get them. They may never look at them and open them. One of the schools I worked at last year didn't open 3/4 of their secondaries because they were automatically generated, but 3/4 of the folks didn't meet the screen. Okay, so you're going to have opportunities, be it an interview, be it a secondary, to address hiccups in your application or whatever. But if you've had something that's caused a major hiccup, I mean, oftentimes people have that early to college, I screwed up, my grades increased. We see that crap all the time. For me, the day I woke up to take my first MCAT, fever of 104 and strep throat. I had no business taking that MCAT, but I did it anyway. And I bombed my first one, I will tell you, and I retook it, did fine. Obviously, I got my MD, but understanding what your weakness is. So first of all, if you have something that impacted your timeline, if there's something obvious, there are multiple withdrawals, you had a lapse in your education, you returned to get a master's or whatever, show the integrity of early on in my collegiate career, I didn't take my education seriously. It took getting out in the real world and returning to understand why I want to do this. Period. Move on. I got sick. I was diagnosed with this. I had to start later, whatever. Or if you are a reapplicant, in your personal statement toward the end, you have got to have a small paragraph that says, since my previous application, I have. You got to call that crap out and address it. I have continued to improve my clinical. I have completed a master's program, and every bit of it should be how you've learned and grown through the additional time, how you are a different applicant. So yes, it can take up a portion of those characters, but you should do it and move on. Watch your transitions. Sometimes I get 5 or 6 paragraphs and there are 0 connections between them. Okay, so you should flow from one thing to the next so there is at least a coherent stream of thought. If you did something in high school that inspired what you were going to do in college, and then something in college motivated you to engage in research, but then you wanted to go to that step to take research from benchtop to bedside and got involved in clinical, and clinical motivated you in the service of others or whatever, then connect them together. But don't give me 5 little mini personal statements that have 0 connections. Use an active tone. Okay, and by the way, please don't ever speak in a personal statement in third person. I have never in my life have someone talking about themselves and speak about themselves in the third person. I don't even know what's going on with that. But more importantly, use active tone. For example, instead of saying, when I started college, blah, 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 say, entering college, I did such and such. Use more complicated words. Instead of saying, I got to do blah, 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 say, I was fortunate to have the opportunity. Don't say, I was lucky. I hate that word, lucky. It's fortunate. I was granted, I had an opportunity. Write in a professional manner. Okay, seek multiple opinions. I've already told you before you hit the submit button, trust people who know you to read your personal statement, and also have people who don't know you to see if they can follow it. However, it is not uncommon for me to get personal statements who say, I had my dad who's a physician, I had such and such, and I can tell you, if I had not been doing this for years and years and years, the medical landscape now is very, very different from when I went to med school. And oftentimes, well-meaning current older physicians and folks who are not involved in the application process have lost touch a little bit by what you really should be looking for. So make sure that you take the advice of people who, and that's actually where we really fit into that. Focus, focus, focus. Tell your journey, tell your story. Do not give me 5,300 characters of Aunt B's, pancreatitis. Okay, that's great if you want to use her as an example of how it inspired you, but that ain't Aunt B's personal statement. It's your personal statement. And mind the 4 R's. write it. I know it's not an R, but get over it. Review it, revise it, repeat, and continue to do it, but then come to a point where you let it go. All right. Watch your word count. Use a systematic approach. I always say, sit down and write out everything you've done through your life. Do a timeline from your childhood to your adulthood. Outline it first. They taught you that in elementary school. Outline a paper, go back to it. And again, use that 5 to 6 paragraph approach. Now, we've already done a lot of highlighting about the experiences, and I can answer more questions about the personal statement, but did I not tell you this is much more important? Maximize your experiences, because once you get through the GPA screen, if you don't make the experiences screen, they may never look at your wonderful personal statement that y'all are so excited about. So as I told you, AMCAS has 15 core competencies. Learn them, commit them to memory. Okay, and I'm going to tell you, one of the things when we talk about your thinking and reasoning capacities, critical thinking and scientific inquiry, so many schools feel like this can only be attained through research. So research is not required for med school. Some schools do require it, but overall is not. But I can tell you that most med schools, when they're looking at experiences, are looking at how you did critical thinking or how you understand the scientific process. And if you did not do research, you're going to have to look for one of your other experiences. Now, I love research because, not because I'm a PhD, I actually don't like lab research that much, but research is so much bang for your buck. Okay, because yes, you can speak about learning how to think more critically and learning about the research process. Okay, but people think research is about, did I get published or not? And yes, publications are one of the areas, one of the categories you can use for AMCAS or whatever, but it is much more important. Research can teach you about teamwork, working collaboratively together. You can speak to communication, doing your presentations in the lab. Yes, your critical thinking and reasoning. It can hit your teaching component because you may train other people in the lab. So research can be so freaking awesome for hitting so many of the 15 core competencies and understanding them, living systems, human behavior, how people interact, capacity for improvement. I screwed up my research experiment. If I had more time, I would tell you about my epitome of the worst research experience screw up ever. And if you come back for my April presentation, I will tell you about it. But I probably made one of the biggest research faux pas ever. The gist of it is I took care of the lab and my research professor asked me, we studied snakes, largemouth bass, and fish, a special kind of frog. And my professor had told me to feed the largemouth bass that we had. His name was Bob. And I was like, okay. And he said, feed him 4 frogs. So I started feeding him frogs. And my research professor came in as I was getting ready to feed him the 4th frog and screamed, no. And I went, what? And I turned around and I'm hanging the frog over the fish's tank. And of course, he jumps out of the tank to get the frog, catches my hand, scares me to death. I scream, throw my arm. You see my fish in the background, by the way. Throw poor Bob halfway across the lab. He smacks into a cabinet, falls on the floor. Bob lives. Don't worry about it. But instead of feeding him our feeder frogs, I was feeding him our research frogs, which were like $2,000 a piece. So I fed him like $8,000 worth of research frogs. I'm lucky my research professor did not, but I learned, and actually the interesting thing was our fish ended up not opening his mouth for the next few days. And we thought I had broken his jaw. And it turned out there was an enzyme in our research frogs that was a paralytic enzyme that actually would end up guiding our future research that we had never looked into. But anyway, resiliency, adaptability, how, when you write your experience, do you talk to all of that? So let's talk about the formatting. Okay, first of all, you decide if it's most meaningful. You get 3 of those. You will get 700 characters for your description and 1,325 characters to talk about the most meaningful ones, why it was meaningful for you. Type. This is what I said. You need to go through and look at all the types that AMCAS allows you. Community service medical, community service non-medical. The fact that there are 2 different community service categories should tell you how important service is to your application. Also, there's paid clinical and there's unpaid. Why is that? Why is there also shadowing? If there are categories, they probably expect you to use them. Now, the type is there. The experience name. People screw this up so much. We're scanning these. We're going to spend an average of 3 minutes on every application, of which 2 minutes is probably going to be on your experiences and about a minute on your personal statement. I've looked at the grid, what your spread is. Then I'm going to look at the experience name. What did you do? Do not put researcher. Do not put TA. Put research assistant, parentheses, RA, in the Bell Lab. Okay, so I know what you did. I've got an abbreviation because now down in your experience, you can use the abbreviation and I know where it was. Then make sure your dates, your hours, be compiling all of this now. Now let's get to the important part of this. Here are all of our different categories, but how do I format those 700 characters? So this is so important. Your first sentence or second sentence should be, what was it? For instance, as an RA in the Bell Lab, we studied biochemical mechanisms in Parkinson's disease. In my role, I did colon, A, blah, B, blah, C, blah. What were your duties? In addition, I taught and trained people in the lab, presented at our research symposium. Then the last 2 sentences have got to be about your growth, what you did. Through this experience, I learned how the time and dedication it takes to get research from benchtop to bedside, honed my analytical skills, improved my communication. So it's what it was, what you did, how you grew. That should be the core component of your experiences. Exceptions would be publications. Then you list the actual publication citations. Things like, how can I combine them? Honors and awards. You might list them 1, 2, 3, 4, list what the award was and a brief statement of what it is. Figure out how you combine all of your information. All right, let's move on to the next. I said, describe what you did, focus on what you learned from it. Do not just write for the sake of writing. Also, I've got to tell you guys, be it your personal statement or your experiences, watch how much you use the word I. And I'm going to tell you, don't ever start a paragraph, don't ever start an experience with I. We're looking at, are you going to be a team player? And if I see, I did this, I did that, I did this. First of all, it looks like you write like a 4th grader. Secondly, it looks like you are narcissistic. You probably are not, but that's how it looks. And then more importantly, it looks like you're not a team player. So in our team, we did, my role was, so avoid the use of I, don't start with I, be very focused in what you do. Be sure to include how you improved or grew from your experience and how this is going to fit into your medical career. And please avoid saying over and over and over again, through this experience, in that moment, I knew. Okay, first of all, it's redundant. You've become the emu. Secondly, I despise in that moment, okay, or I knew, whatever, because nobody, my dean used to go, ain't nobody come down, smack you on the head, said, blang, it is all clear. Find a different way to articulate that. All right, so you want to list and organize, make a list of everything right now, attach it to a category, and then beside each category, write which potential experience, which potential core competencies you think it's going to fit. If it is less than, if it's greater than 15 combined, if it's less than 15, recheck and see what you're maybe missing. If it says less than 9, I say less than 12. Maybe you're not ready. Below 12 is a red flag to us. Just say no to high school. Experiences from high school do not count. You can talk about them in the secondaries, but not in your application, okay? You can talk about them there, but in an experience, the only time you can do it is if you started it in high school and continued it in college. That's where I talk about like combining shadowing. Or if you did something in high school, go back and revisit it so you can add it in. Strive for accuracy, okay? I had somebody the other day, and we all fluff. Nobody's following you around. It doesn't have to be precision. But I had somebody the other day who sent me their experiences, who worked full time through college, took a full academic load, and then was listing everything they did over the course of a year at like 400 and 500 hours of it. And I went, really? You want a committee to call bull on your application? Because there aren't enough hours in the day. By the way, if you do a study abroad and you were there for 2 months, you don't count 60 days, 24 hours a day. It's 8 hours a day max. If you do an international mission trip for a week, it's 8 hours a day, not 24 hours a day. You are not doing medical missions while you're sleeping. You may be dreaming about them, but it don't count. All right, be selective about your most meaningful. Generally, we are looking for a clinical, a service. If you've done research, one of them is research, but we laugh if we see somebody who's done something for 12 hours and you're going to tag that as a most meaningful. I mean, you better dig long and deep to tell me how I shadowed Dr. Smiley for 2 days in his office for 12 hours and it was the epiphany, because we're not really going to believe it. All right, switch up the wording. Again, I've told you, don't use doctor, say physician. By the way, in your personal statement and your experiences, please do not say Mr. X, Mr. B, Mr. whatever. Okay, give them a name. Give them a name with a few characters. Does not have to be their real name. If you're going to talk about an interaction with somebody, name them Sally or Sue or Ben, something with small letters so you don't take up your characters. But rather than Mr. X, if you say Ben taught me, it is much more personal. If it is a physician, you can give them a name. Dr. Smack, okay? Because you're not violating any confidentiality with that. Show growth, advocate for yourself, show how you learned and grew. All right, pick relevant things for your journey and make sure to tell us why they are relevant. And you'd be surprised, many people, I've met people who have traveled, much like me. I used to work for the World Health Organization, and there are a few places or continents I have not visited. Okay, but if you can say as your experience, one of your experiences is international travel, and then dash 38 countries, and then you say, over the course of my lifetime, I have been fortunate to visit 38 different countries to understand both our unique differences and similarities, for instance, then that shows cultural awareness, okay? Know the format. This is not a resume. And this time, I'm always getting people going, can you look at my resume? I can, but you're not going to put it on your application. There are maybe 1% of secondary applications that will say attach your resume, but for the most part, this is a job, but it's not a job. This is very different. So understand that and avoid the fluff. Oh dear God, please avoid the fluff. Be focused, summarized, be clear and concise. Set yourself up for an interview, because personal statements and experiences for universities that do not blind interviewers to your application, it will come up and they will ask you about it. I have had students in the past who tried to fake it till they make it. I can tell you, and this is honestly the truth, and you can ask any interviewer. Generally, we can tell within the first minute to minute and a half when we sit down with an interviewee, do you have that it factor? And that it factor comes from knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, and how to articulate that. All right, before I go to answering questions, one of the things, so at the Princeton Review, we offer guided tutoring if you're struggling with any classes. We offer MCAT prep, obviously you know that, but we also offer admissions counseling. Now I'm going to tell you, if you're looking to apply next year, well, first of all, I'm still taking people for this cycle. And if you're thinking about applying this year and you want some help on getting your personal statement and experiences right, please don't wait until you're done with your MCAT, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if you decide in the process of this that you're not ready, I'll move you to the next cycle and we grant you one free move. The other thing is, if you're looking to apply next year, for the love of Pete, if you're interested in getting help from me as a premier counselor or one of our experts, sign up now, because I'm going to tell you something. You pay the same price today that you will pay in October. So why the heck would you not get a whole additional year of service for the same price? They all end at the same time. And if we start working now and you've got deficiencies, we can fix them. I get you in March and April. I don't have time for that. Okay, so real quickly, before I start answering questions, let me go to my next poll, which basically just says, so I can reach out to you. If you would like for advice on how to prepare for the MCAT, check A. If you want how to maybe work with me or one of my counselors, check B. And if you need help from tutor.com boosting your GPA, they're great at it. This way I can make sure that I reach out to you guys. Do me a favor though. If you're interested in admissions counseling and we reach out to you, now if you're already enrolled, please don't check. Okay, but if you're interested in admissions counseling from one of us, please let me know. And if Garrett, my admissions counselor, reaches out to you, all you got to say is webinar, give me my discount, and we got extra discounts for you guys. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and I am going to go down here to our chat. If hopefully it will open. Gosh, it is so stinking slow. Let me go ahead and flip you guys to this next stuff. We do great tests, great grades, great but the big thing is, in terms of admissions counseling, we can offer you primary applications, secondary support, but for the most part, people do our comprehensive packages because people forget it is so much more than your primary application. And I'm going to switch to this last slide so that you know where to go. Just go to our website, just type in the Princeton Review Medical Admissions Counseling. And if you click on that web page at the top, it says schedule an appointment with a counselor, and Garrett will reach out to you. You guys surely got some questions. There are no questions here. Did I miss questions? I looked in the chat box. Does anybody have anything for me? Yes, yes, yes. There they are. You can see me. You can hear me. Okay, yes. How do we type? We can hear you. It's okay. All right, so let's get, will the slides be emailed to you? Let me try to get to these. So yes, because you registered for this webinar, following this, once I do the recording, you will be sent a link to the recording as well as all the questions. Let me get to some of those questions. Is it okay if the clinical letter is from a shadowing physician? Absolutely. It can be somebody you worked with or somebody that you shadowed. Should research and presentations be listed as different activities? This is very important. That's an excellent question. And that comes down to your 15 experiences. Okay. Generally, research and publications should be listed separately. Okay. If you have an extra slot, like if you've done a presentation like at a national meeting, then yes, I would list it separately. But if you don't have the extra slot, then you can talk about it in your research. So it really does come up. You asked about how you sign up. I talked about going to the website, clicking on appointment with Garrett. I'm the premier counselor, and then I have 3 other experts who do our other packages. Would love to have you guys. What is the minimum amount of shadowing and clinical hours you recommend? This is an excellent question. Last year, the average number of shadowing hours was almost 400. Okay, that is total over all of your shadowing, and that is combining in-person and virtual shadowing as well. Now, ways to get shadowing hours are virtual shadowing, in-person, volunteering with free clinics in your area, volunteering at refugee clinics, doing an international mission trip. And that's why if you combine them all together, so much more bang for your buck. Also, if you're a hospital volunteer, hospital volunteering is considered non-clinical service, okay? But because you're interacting and communicating with people, but Every floor you volunteer on, we can also count that floor in your shadowing, in your list. If you volunteer on cardiology and you observe nurses and clinicians on that floor as a volunteer, you can list that up in your shadowing. So that's where it's really our role to help you tweak and pull all of that out. I hope that made sense. So ideally, you want a minimum of 100 hours total in 3 to 5 different disciplines. One must be primary care, family medicine, OBGYN, or pediatrics. What would you say is the best way to go about looking for research opportunities? If you're an undergrad, go to your Office of Undergraduate Research. If you are not an undergrad and you're out in the working world, or you're getting a master's, look through your program. Look at the AAMC's website for summer research opportunities. Look for jobs with clinical research organizations as a CRA or a CRC or a CRO, so that you could get clinical research in clinical trials. Also look for medical practices that are doing ongoing research in their practice. So this was a really cool thing. And guys, I'm going to run a little bit over, so feel free to stay with me because I'm going to try to go through all of the questions. So both of my children who are in healthcare worked as MAs and scribes in a medical practice, but both practices that they worked with, one in the ER was doing a clinical research project in part of their practice. My daughter in the family medicine practice she worked in was doing a study on diabetes. So that's a way to get hands-on clinical and research. And you can ask the clinicians that you work with if you could field a project. My daughter did an educational manual for new onset diabetics, and then they measured the compliance of people who did the study versus not. So there are lots of ways to tweak and create research. If I've done lots of research and publications and have not presented, is that a red flag? Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Publications, your research, plenty. You're fine. Is it okay if you are sure to do EMT and shadowing after the application? And again, I talked about this. It's great that you're going to do it, but if you don't have it yet, it's probably better to take a breath and consider pushing off your application. And here's the interesting thing. Now, remember, I told you I'm a dinosaur. I'm old as spit. When I went through med school, the rule of thumb was apply after your junior year to start after you finish your senior year. And that used to be about 70% of applicants. Now, only about 30% of applicants apply after their junior year. 70% of students are taking gap years to get paid clinical research, hands-on stuff, 1 or 2 gap years. The average admitting age is 25, 26, okay? Of the 30% who applied as juniors, okay, so like people who would want to apply this year, graduate in 2024 and start, do you know the acceptance rate of those folks is only about 19%? And I will tell you the screening standards are a lot higher for reapplicants. Now, not that it can't be done, but something to definitely take into consideration. If I have questions about talking about high school experiences, does it count to talk about an experience in high school, such as if I did karate and continued into college? However, there was a 1-year gap due to COVID, changed the discipline of karate. Yes, okay, so this is a very good experience, thing to talk about. In your personal statement, you may talk about things you did in high school and then how they have continued to impact you in college, or how you've used that in college, or a reference about that. What you can't have is an experience that is dated in high school and only for high school. The exception, Boy Scouts, the Eagle Scout, or the Gold Award for girls. Everything else needs to be further on. You can talk about it in your personal statement. You can talk about it in a secondary and an interview, but it cannot be an experience. What if I only shadowed in high school through a particular program and you have no shadowing since? However, I held a job as an ED scribe for 1.5 years. Do I need to shadow again? Okay, this is how we tweak this. All right. You shadowed in high school. You were a scribe in the ED. So you were an ED scribe. But as an ED scribe, there are other physicians that come in to that ED, and you need to reflect on that and if you're still continuing it. So For instance, I have a good friend who went to the ED this week with pancreatitis. He went into AFib. His a cardiologist had to come in. You're observing cardiology. You're observing endocrinology. You're observing internal medicine. So we can count those specialties in your shadowing as part of your role. So it's kind of double counting, but as long as you can speak to what you witnessed, you'll be fine. Also, hospice volunteering totally counts. Hospice is phenomenal because one, you can count it in your shadowing if you observe the physicians, the geriatricians, the oncologists, etc. Plus, it is also phenomenal unpaid clinical service, understanding the dying process and the impact not just on the person, but the family, like our friends who are now potentially facing at 43, he may not be here 11 months from now. How does she carry on? Do AdComs look down on shadowing experiences? Nope, they're required. AMCAS says it, shadowing. And we want to see, it's funny because my old dean used to go, shadowing is great. We want shadowing, so you've explored different areas, but he would always go, well, we want to know that you rolled up your sleeves and gotten in there. And what that means is he wants to know that you've engaged in hands-on patient care, be that as a scribe, as an MA, as an EMT, that you have engaged with patients, helping them and interacting with them and understanding the patient experience, as well as the role of physician, the physician-patient interaction, the role of a physician in his office, the role of a physician in his community, because it is so much more than just patients rolling through your office and treating them. There is administrative work, there's running the office, there's interactions with your staff. And so, yes, shadowing is not looked down upon at all. If I had worked with a physician since high school, but my position changed over time from medical record reorder medical assistant, should I total all of that? Yes, you absolutely should. And in this aspect from high school on in, you can list in my roles I have done. It doesn't have to say in high school I did this and in college I did this. As long as you can reflect about it, take it for everything it's worth. Is hospital volunteering not counted as clinical volunteering? Oh, and I actually just spoke to that. So hospital volunteering, let's say you volunteered for 200 hours as a hospital volunteer, and we will list that as your clinical service. Okay, but also in our shadowing, we'll probably take 30 to 40 of those hours and also count the different physicians you observed. So it's kind of double counting. You don't take all of it and list it because then that's very obvious, but you definitely had exposure to those areas. And as long as you can talk about it, does virtual shadowing have less weight than in person? Yes, it does. But as I told you, if we put all our shadowing together and you have in-person and virtual and you can speak to it, you don't have to separate it out. You just list the physicians that you shadow. Now you're welcome to list it separately as long as it doesn't looks too skewed. If you've got a nice balance, break it out. If you don't, combine them all together. Also for the application, is it bad if we bring up negative experiences that may be painted in a negative light in our personal experience or in an interview? Is that a big deterrent? And we actually spoke about this. If you have negatives, like big negatives, I took 3 years off of college. I didn't start college till I was 24. And there's a reason behind it. An illness, you had to drop out of school to help support your family. There was an accident, just pure ignorance, how you grew from it. If there is something, you can acknowledge it, but you need to move on. But also remember that almost every secondary application will have a space for, is there anything else you want the committee to know? And in your application, let's say maybe you've had a student conduct issue. You have a space in your application to write a small blurb about that. I was accused of cheating, whatever. I got a DUI. I got this. If there's anything on your application or in a deep dive, and trust me, when I say deep dive, even things that are no longer on your record, deep dives will pull them up. Okay, you do not, it is far better to be transparent on the front end than have them come up that way. And I will tell you guys, I got somebody into med school who had been convicted of a felony 2 years ago. We can make it happen. It's just it depends on what it is and how you learn from it. Last year, for students who I got 2 interviews, who followed my directions, did what I said, and got interviews, 100% of my students got in a year when 36% got in. And it's not like I got some magic wand, because if you don't have the credentials, there's nothing we can do to fix that. But if you'll listen to the advice and present your application in the right way, we can make you stand out. Also for the, we already brought that up. How many research hours are enough? Good point. Last year, the average number of hours was 1,325. I have no idea how that happened. Generally, what we say is if you've done research for at least a year, 2 semesters, or a summer and a semester, for a minimum of 200 to 300 hours, you should be okay. For my students, the average I see is 400 to 600 hours. We typically want that either in a wet lab or in a lab with clinical applications, or doing clinical-based research with patients. And if becoming a TA over the next semester for a research course at a hospital, could you put that? Would it look good? Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Would publications from high school be okay to include? Yes, but a little bit more difficult to approach. Hopefully you've got other publications. Generally, if that was associated with research, that's how you might want to reference it. Am I able to use letters of recommendation that were written for a previous cycle? Yes, for last year, 2 options. You can reuse them or you can have them update them. Generally, we say if a letter is more than 2 years, absolutely more than 3 years old, you want to have them updated, or you want to get new letters. Also, if you've done a master's since you've applied, you absolutely want a letter from that. You're taking the MCAT in May. Do you recommend that you push your cycle to 2024, 2025? Oh, really good question. So in terms of timing for the MCAT, ideally you want a score before you submit. However, if you're not testing until May or even into the first part of June and you're not going to have a score, you want to submit your application to one super rich school, a school you will never get into, okay, when AMCAS opens. And then that way AMCAS can start verifying your application while you wait on your score. Then you can get that score to determine your application, the schools you want to apply to. If you need to retest, and I always tell you, I don't care if you test today or you test in May, you test, you wait 48 hours, and you schedule a retest date for 3 to 4 weeks, ideally about 3 weeks, after you'll get your score back in case you need to retest, because you want to have that date. Okay, you don't want to be scrambling to find a date. And do not worry if you have to retest late June or early July, because yes, you can create a school list, and yes, it is a little bit later, but most schools don't fully start reviewing applications until August. Exceptions, Oklahoma's and Texas, and they will still accept those scores coming later. Sorry, I meant virtual shadowing, and we talked about that. What if I have a lot of work experience at different supermarkets, or let's say outside personal business, like other occupations? Are those considered valuable experiences even if they're not medical? Absolutely. Work experience where either you've been out in the working world or you've worked during your education is important for accountability, time management, working with other people, working with people different from you, communication skills, absolutely can be included. I was not able to get research experience in undergrad due to other circumstances. I have since graduated, but is there a way that I can get that experience? Again, we talked about if you're not getting it through the undergrad, look at clinical research organizations, look at research ongoing within a practice where you may work in a clinical setting. And there are still summer programs, but they're not quite as valuable. How important are the verifiers for the activity? Would it be okay to list another student in a club that was a president, etc.? Does it have to be an adult professional? Nope, it is perfectly fine. If you were in an organization and you had somebody supervising or somebody headed the foundation, the contacts must be legit. We must have an email or a cell phone contact and where they were from. But I can tell you, I've been doing this for 25 years and I can't tell you how many applications I'm on, and nobody's ever called me. We will reach out if stuff is absolutely ridiculous, but we're going through 10,000 applications. We don't have time to contact people. If I don't have any research experience, will it hurt my application? As I said, it can hurt you if a school requires research. Obviously eliminate them, but offset it with your other experiences and find ways to demonstrate critical thinking and scientific processes. If I put classes in which I had labs, could that be used in place of wet lab research? No, you can't put those classes in for wet lab research, but you can talk about that in secondary. So you could get by with it that way. Is the webinar being recorded? Yes. Can you review the recording? Yes, we will send it to all of you and it will be listed in my archives. Will adding technology internship like our robotics value? Absolutely. Information for the future, where we're going. Technology is our wave of the future. Although interestingly, it's funny because everybody talks about increasing access through telemed, and med schools are actually looking at that in two different ways, because telemed is actually considered sort of separating us from people. So it is also really important to think about how you position your answers and your understanding of those. I think that covers all of our questions. So I thank all of you guys for staying on with me. I really appreciate your participation. Go to our webinar website and make sure to register for my upcoming webinars in April, July, and October. If you're in one of our MCAT classes, make sure to come to my Med Advantage sessions. Otherwise, reach out to Garrett and schedule an appointment, and hope to work with you guys. And regardless, all the best. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.